welcome to the second concurrent session of the day, the 5 W's of Math Corequisites. Our presenter today is Emily Carpenter from Seminole State College. Emily Carpenter has been in public education for almost 2 decades with experience ranging from early childhood now to higher education. With a Bachelor of Science degree in elementary education and Master of Science in Teaching, Learning, and Leadership, she is an educator first and foremost and strives to keep a student-centered approach in all the courses she teaches. Emily is passionate about explicitly teaching students to nurture their mathematical mindset and to experience freedom in the exploration of math. If you have any questions for our presenter during the session, please feel free to enter those into the Q&A section at the bottom of the Zoom room screen, and we will address them at the end of the session. On that note, I will hand it over to our presenter.
I don't think it's letting me share my video.
Oh, I'm so sorry about that. You should be able to now.
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. I guess good afternoon in some. We're Central Time Zone. So Seminole State College in Oklahoma, to be clear. So we're here in the middle part of the country that is often confused. But I did want to talk to you just a little bit today. I'm gonna turn the screen off, sorry. About our Seminole State here in Oklahoma, our plan for corequisites. And I'm sorry, I'm having a little bit of some technical difficulties here. Let's try that. There we go. Sorry, I actually teach a class on Zoom, so I was teaching this morning, so I had my screens all switched up. So hopefully everybody can see that now. But I wanted to just start out with saying a little bit that we are very much in the thick of this. And obviously all of our everything has changed a little bit over the last couple of semesters, and we continue to adapt and change. And so one of my favorite things about presenting at this conference and then talking about math pathways and Corecs is just sharing our experience very humbly. Not that we have it all figured out, but we found some things that work for us. But I love the collaborative conversation we get to have. So welcome chats, welcome questions, welcome comments, welcome ideas. I'll even share some of our struggles, and I'll share my contact information at the end. But I don't want to take full credit here. I'm just the one talking today, but there's several of us, and I'll share all of our contacts at the end that kind of have come together, and over the last couple of years started this adventure, if you will, moving to multiple pathways and a full Corequisite model here at Seminole State. And so there's me on the end, a little different hair these days, you know, COVID hair, but come with a lot of experience. And our experience, many of us come from, we actually all come from K-12 backgrounds, and then differing levels of engagement here at the college level. But like I said, all three of us would be happy to talk to you a little bit about our journey, if you will. So this is actually kind of old data. Ironically, I don't know if anybody else is experiencing this in their state. We were having a difficult time with the lapse in COVID, and then numbers changing and averaging together. So I just decided to leave our fall of 18 numbers up there because we dipped down low and then we're back up. And so this seems to be kind of the normal. It was more of an average of the last couple of years. So I'm positive I'm not the only one speaking of that. I teach statistics as well, so it's been interesting trying to grab some of these graphs and data for you to update, and it's either not been reported or the numbers are so off that a lot of the values are real skewed. So traditionally we have about 1,500 students, pretty small campus. We are a rural campus, quite a few commuting, and we have a high Native population as well. 75% of our students are under the age of 20, but not necessarily what you would consider traditional students. And so a lot of times they're young mothers or going on, they're independent and living out on their own. So that kind of gives you a little bit of a shot of what we are, the Seminole State College in Oklahoma. So a couple of years ago, we decided in 2017, fall of 2017, which doesn't seem that long ago, but been a couple of years now, decided to go to, we had a lot of really great initiatives going on in our state. And luckily, Dr. Linda Goller, that you saw her picture, who's actually serving as our Vice President of Academic Affairs now, it was kind of our mentor, and she was on a lot of different committees at the state level. And we saw this shift as our state was moving to more and more discussions of math pathways and aligning those for transferability for students. And then there was also this conversation about going to this Cowreck model, and we had piloted that a little bit already, and we knew that, philosophically that's where we needed to go. And so we just decided to do it. And, a couple of years ago, as we started talking and attending Hawks conferences, this was kind of new, and it's been really exciting and fun. And like I said, a great collaborative experience to be able to, as more institutions and more states are moving to multiple pathways and co-requisite models, it's been fun to hear all of the diversity of structure and what that looks like and what the content looks like. So appreciate now that that doesn't make us really novel at this point, which is super cool for math education in our country. But it was a little bit interesting that we decided to do it all at one time. We basically just kind of revamped our entire math structure, which that's the face. But it was pretty fun. So kind of just to tell you very briefly where we came from, we had kind of the traditional prereq model going in, where we had a basic math, a basic algebra, and that had kind of morphed. That's actually before I came on board. When I came on board, we had a basic algebra, an intermediate algebra, and then of course the college algebra for remediation. And we had two pathways: the college algebra, which 80% of our students went into, and then a more of a basic, we called it quantitative reasoning. That's what we call it now. We called it something else different. Then it was math and society, which was kind of an odd name anyways. But so that's kind of where we were. And we had, like I said, piloted this college algebra co-rec already. And I'll show you a little timeline in a minute. So we knew that it worked. We felt good about it, but we were kind of handpicking the students that were going from basic algebra into that co-rec. And so where we kind of are now, continuing to revise those math pathways, really working with our different degree programs and making sure that they are aligning conceptually with what they're asking their students to do in their classes that they will take as a part of their degree program. And then in their relying on those experts to tell us what the students will need as far as math skills in their not only future studies, but their jobs, their careers. There's a kind of a new pathway, this math modeling, math functions pathway that we've added on that continuing as a state. We've been pretty active in conversations, what that looks like as a state, and trying to get some alignment there. And then of course, the ever push for retention and graduation rates, and how does this affect that? And of course, like I said, COVID takes a big hit on that, on not only our enrollment, but retention and graduation rates. And so trying to recover, and, it's really neither here nor there, but it stripped away some of the other pieces that were probably keeping us from looking at some of the glaring realities of what else can we do to increase retention and graduation rates. And of course, math continues to be one of those biggest hurdles. So really just kind of solidified what we were doing. These are our four pathways. So we moved to, of course, we already had the college algebra. And what we decided to do with college algebra, we decided to split it into two pre-calcs. And we chose purposely to rename those. And we kept the course number the same. 1513 is kind of like the traditional Oklahoma college algebra. But what we did with that is we were really trying to keep students from just enrolling in college algebra because that's what their parents had done, or that's what they'd always heard about college algebra, and kind of trying to break that cycle. And even with our high schools, trying to break the cycle of the high schools, trying to communicate clearly and trying to help them understand that those two pre-calcs, whether it's the pre-calc for engineering, which is our 1513, or the pre-calc for business bio, they are both on a calc track, which is either BizCalc or, the calc sequence, Calc 1, 2, and 3. and with the engineering and computer science. So that's helped a little bit. That seems really something kind of silly, but the renaming has helped kind of structurally pull those two pathways apart, but then also kind of up the rigor. Like if it sounds maybe a little bit more rigorous for students, not that we're wanting to scare them away from it, but just really trying to keep them in the right pathway and trying to keep, enrollment confusion happening. Then we have our elementary statistics, which has been a really fun class to teach. And we're seeing a lot of our bigger universities that we transfer to actually requiring statistics. And so we've seen that pathway really blossom. And then our quantitative reasoning, which was one of our original pathways, was kind of like our general math, if you will, math and society, but we also renamed it quantitative reasoning because that's really what it is. It's a really broad look. We use the viewing life mathematically text for that class. And I think it's important to note for all of these classes we do use Hawks Learning, and I can kind of talk to you about the different products we used and why we use the different texts for all 4 of these classes. But those are our majors. I'm not going to read those to you, but you can kind of see how we differentiated those majors out for each pathway. And we had really watched and made sure that the concepts being taught in those classes were applicable to the different majors. And we've also watched a little bit through some student surveys. We were worried about students changing majors and whether or not, I mean, that's the number one usual concern and argument against math pathways. Well, I want my student to take college algebra, or I want to take college algebra because it'll transfer everywhere. What happens if I change my major? And that is the case. I mean, if you go from being an elementary ed major to an engineering major, then you are going to have to take a different math course. And I would hope you would want to take a different math course preparing for your major. But for the most part, we've actually seen quite a bit of change within the pathway. And so that's a whole discussion about meta majors. And I think there's a couple of other sessions that are talking about that. But we haven't seen as much problems within these pathways with having to take another math class. So that was good. That was one of our concerns. So these are just our placement cut scores. This may not mean just a whole lot to everybody, but I just kind of wanted to show you how we decided to differentiate at the different classes or the different with the Cowreck model. And so our very first semester, I think I have a timeline here. I'm going to skip back to that one because that will make more sense after I talk about this. So we went to these 4 pathways. We had 3 pathways fall of 17. We went full Cowreck. We just did away with basic algebra. And then we actually, in the spring of 18, we did put 1 section of basic algebra back in. And that was actually driven by students. We had some students that were placed in the pre-calc. For the most part, are non-traditional students that really just did not have the confidence. They were requesting basic algebra. So, and you see that Oklahoma, all the post-secondary implemented pathways. So we were a little bit ahead of the curve, but something that we're doing along with our other institutions in our state, which has been a very fun collaborative process. So you can see here if this makes any sense to you. All 4 of our pathways are we're able to offer a Corequisite with, and then we only offer that basic algebra. See if I can get my annotation go in here. We only offer this basic algebra for those students that are going into pre-calc, and those that has to do with the ACT and placement test scores. They can go back and retest, or they can decide to self-select and go on and take basic algebra if they choose to. We only offer it in the fall, and so it was just something we kind of decided to do along with advising, because we were hearing that there were some students that really just wanted this semester before they went into pre-calc. The cool thing is if they take it in the fall, we can still get them through their math in one year in 2 semesters. So when we say we're a full Cowreck model, I always have to give a disclaimer that we do have the 1 basic algebra, but with the caveat that it was driven by students wanting that. And we're seeing less and less enrollment in that. So it would not surprise me at some point if that just goes away as students continue to hear like, hey, I took I took pre-calc, I was successful, it was fine. We're just constantly battling, as I'm sure all of our other math instructors out there are, just the overall fear and anxiety, which unfortunately seems to have increased. And we may see a little bit of increase. That's a philosophical conversation to have another day. That as we have students that have, had some gaps over the last couple of semesters in instruction. So we're going to leave it put for now, and then we'll kind of readjust. So our past issues, kind of the whole argument for Corequisites, they were not graduating, they weren't getting through their math in time. And then they weren't able to take their necessary classes. So their science classes, because they were just spinning their wheels, trying to get through 3 to 4 classes of math. And then a lot of times they were just trying to, get to this college algebra that may or may not be a relevant course for the math that they're going to be required for their major and their career. So, so this was our completion. This is our success rate. This is before 2016. It had gone up a little bit, but percentages completing college math in one semester, 35%, not doing so hot. So that was kind of the driving force, having us go into, or forcing us to go into, or encouraging us to just go on and pull the Band-Aid off, and let's do some Corequisites, let's do some pathways, let's restructure this and get students over this hurdle of math. And maybe at a conversation where we're, enjoying math and can see some application, as opposed to just one more, and don't get me wrong, love me some algebra, but one more algebra class that I'm having to take after many years of that in high school. And then it's given us some opportunity in those pre-calc classes to really teach them and hold students accountable for the rigor of the class. And so it's just been a pretty good plan all the way through. I think I've already talked about that. So some of our future challenges that we've had is continuing to talk to counselors, math teachers, administration. This is better. We still have a couple of institutions in our state, if they're transferring there, that still really push college algebra. And so, for instance, our ag students a lot of times have to take the pre-calc for engineering. So just continuing to talk and build those relationships and make sure that we're preparing students adequately. We want them to be able to transfer. Obviously, a 2-year institution, that's a big focus for us, is making sure that our students are set up for success. But we also are trying to then have those conversations with all the stakeholders. So the other thing that has happened to us, this is kind of things that you didn't really think about, when you pull a Band-Aid like that, you try to plan for all the things, and there's just no way to do that. One of the issues that we had the very first semester, that they were so used to just putting students in classes. We have a lot of really high percentage, between 60 and 70% of students needed remediation. So it was kind of the common practice of our advisors, our new student advisors coming in, just to put them in math and hurry up and put them in math and Comp 1. And so our very first semester, we were like, our classes were overloaded. We were having to teach a whole bunch of extra hours. And then we got to spring semester, and our classes were barely made. We got everybody through in the fall. And so we've had to have this conversation with our, and obviously our pre-engineering students, there's some majors that they do need to be in math, but we've also started with our offerings, started to structure that a little bit more, where, if they needed to take math second semester, it'd be okay, because, hey, we're getting them through in one semester, as opposed to not everybody has to have it fall their freshman year. So, I think we talked a little bit about them students choosing meta majors. Scheduling continues. We had kind of had it figured out, and then COVID happened, and then we have had this big shift. Be interesting to hear about some of your institutions still have this big shift of students moving online. And so that's kind of been this readjusting then of trying to determine not only how many face-to-face math classes that we need, but how many then projecting percentage-wise of how many we need pathways. each pathway. So that's kind of a scheduling issue that's has continued. I mean, it's just constantly adjusting. We call our Corequisites special topics. And so it'll be special topics in math, or special topics in statistics, special topics in algebra. And we try to limit those classes to 22 students. And I'm going to talk about kind of the nuts and bolts of that in just a minute. But sometimes that can be challenging in itself because we have so many students needing remediation. We try to keep about a 50% split between those that are transitional or developmental and non-transitional. I come from a elementary education background, but my master's was actually in special education. And so I really, really dig that idea of inclusion and having that great differentiation in the class. Sometimes that's difficult and sometimes out of our hands. And so something we strive for. And so we really try to limit that special topics at 22. And then we cap the other classes at like 40. So we should at least have a little bit of differentiation, but it doesn't always happen that way. And then something that we're actually looking at for the fall, we're going to be developing this summer, and I would love some feedback. We're going to start explicitly teaching some academic success skills. And for those of you that use Hawks, there's a whole kind of academic success skills kind of at the beginning of each course. I think it's the 0 points or whatever. And so these are conversations we're having with our students, but kind of a one-on-one or maybe every once in a while here in our special topics. And we are just as a whole really discussing how can we increase persistence, how can we decrease anxiety, having to explicitly teach some of these academic success skills. And so we're going to use some of the Hawks lessons and then develop some pieces with that, and going to do kind of like a 2-week seminar at the beginning of the semester, I think is the plan as of right now. So stay tuned. If anyone is doing something like that, like I said, it's all things we're talking about, but then we just really decided, sometimes what we assume students know and understand is not the case. And we're just seeing kind of an increase of students with a lot of anxiety and a lot of fear, and just not having really great patience and persistence with themselves as they're working. And so we're just going to try to address that. So that's kind of one of our future things that we're going to be working on. We have put a lot of problem-based learning. We really enjoy the different problems that we are able to integrate. We use some of the ones that Hawks has, and then have used some of those and kind of morphed them a little bit. But that's been something really, really interesting and intriguing as we've been able to move to the pathways. It's opened up our ability to create problems or utilize problems that are so much more applicable, and is really driving engagement. It drives attendance, it drives retention, if students are feeling like it's worthwhile. And so a little bit about like our Cowreck. What does it look like? Kind of a little bit, I've been a little philosophical. So let's talk specifically about what the Cowreck looks like. We typically teach it in a computer lab. And so it is a flipped classroom approach immediately before or after their credit bearing course. So if we meet Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 9 o'clock for statistics, then our Cowreck is Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 10 o'clock. And so it is 3 credit hours. And we have students are working in small groups or working individually. It really just depends on the day. It depends on the instructor. Sometimes when I teach my own, I mean, in a perfect world, I teach my own Cowreck. That doesn't always work out, but we are a small enough group that I actually taught statistics today, taught some probability, and I hopped out and told the instructor that was teaching the Cowreck, like, hey, we didn't get all the way through with this project. And so she was like, okay, well, we're going to finish it up together, so it really is kind of utilizes a time just to provide support for those students. And each class kind of has their own personality. We've seen a lot of really great collaboration come into play as students the cool thing about pathways that you don't really think about, one of the good things that we didn't think about, that they are able to kind of establish these cohorts. And so because of their degree programs, and because we've structured those pathways with degree programs, if they're taking statistics, and they may also be taking pre-nursing, and they may be taking principles of biology. And so we found that those groups of students kind of naturally form their own cohort, and then are starting to study together and kind of provide support for each other. And, there's a whole vast amount of research that talks about having a sense of belonging, and that really playing such a huge role in retention. And so that's kind of a spin-off of the Corequisites and the pathways together that we didn't really anticipate. That's been really rewarding for students. So a lot of times they're working in small groups individually, working on their assignments, working on some of those projects. We typically like to teach your own Corequisites. I mean, I can't even tell you how rewarding that is, not only for the students, but as an instructor. You want to talk about holding yourself accountable. You teach something, and I always tease that, like, I'll have students like smiling at me, and they're just, we go to the Cowreck and go to special topics, and I'll realize that they're just friendly. They're just like, yeah, I have no idea what she's talking about. I'm like, okay, well, hold up. Let me reteach this. Let me restructure this for you. And so it's really a great opportunity. Obviously, we can hold students accountable. That doesn't always doesn't work with us with scheduling, though. And so, for instance, I serve as division chair, so I'm kind of limited on the amount of hours I can teach. And so we just make sure we have a really open, clear communication with those instructors that are teaching the partners. And so, for instance, if I grade for my quantitative reasoning class, then I send the grades right over to Miss Hauser. She has access to my Hawks course. And so we just work fluidly in and out, and work with the students to provide support for them. I will tell you that for online, I'm going to talk a little bit about online in just a moment, but for online, we did go on and say that the credit-bearing teacher needs to teach the online Cowreck. We tried to pilot that. Actually, I piloted it with another instructor that was teaching here face-to-face, because we're like, well, we'll be seeing each other. It was really confusing for students. So that was just something that we tried, and we didn't really love. So for the online Cowrecks, we do go on and say the same instructor is going to teach those. Just for sanity for everybody. So a couple of thoughts on how kind of the Cowrecks, how do we grade the Cowrecks? It is a pass-fail course. And so we tied that directly to the success of the credit-bearing course. So you have to pass one to pass the other. Again, we didn't really think about that structure, but it doesn't happen very often. But if your Cowreck is graded a lot with, like, for instance, attendance, and then we use the integrated review. So maybe they're doing integrated review and attendance. Well, they could be completing all that in the Cowreck and maybe not passing pre-calc. And so we had to go back into our policy and put a little asterisk there that they have to pass both of those, because you definitely don't want them clearing their deficiency if they're going to have to turn around and retake the course. Again, doesn't happen very often, but we did have to tie those two together. I've talked a little bit about size. The different syllabus is it's the same syllabus, other than it just notes that it's pass fail. And we all grade our special topics or our Cowrecks a little bit differently, but most of us have some sort of compilation of attendance. We put some weight on attendance for special topics, because we are, again, kind of that whole conversation about academic success skills, really trying to teach students how to be good students. Like, how do you need to come to class? You need to, what does engagement look like? What is, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. So we just found that if we put some weight on attendance for the Cowrecks, that seemed to help. And then we all use the integrated review. We all use it a little bit differently. And so there's some instructors that actually grade it. I actually have a couple of the integrated reviews that I use in my credit bearing, because I need some, if I know there's some prereq skills that I know everybody's going to miss or missing, most people are missing, then I use the integrated review in both. And so personally, I graded off of their, if it's their stat assignments, the integrated review, and then attendance is like a third split. And then we do have a pretty strict attendance policy, like I said, really just trying to help students. We found that a lot of our transitional students don't have some of those academic success skills and just sometimes don't have those habits put into place. And so we have found that the attendance policy has helped with that as well. And that's in place actually for our English developmental classes as well. And if you want more information on that, I can send that to you. It's got some details, but I don't know if anyone really cares. So our new adventure, we just keep having adventures here at Seminole State. And something we were actually already planning on doing, thankfully, we had planned on piloting an online Corequisite summer of 2020. Then obviously we really needed to pilot an online Corequisite summer of 2020. So it was good, it was already in the works. But we are seeing this push at our institution, as many institutions, to have these online degree programs. Well, you can't be a fully online degree program if you aren't providing some sort of remediation online. And we, as a policy, have not typically taken remediation from another institution. It has to be an in-house remediation to clear that deficiency. So it really was kind of this like, how are we going to do this? We're putting all these online degree programs out there. But if you're sitting at 60-70% of your students need remediation, then that's a pretty big just hurdle for them. So what do we do? What does that look like? So I got together with a couple of our instructors and we just kind of pulled apart our special topics. Why does it work? And I've got some data to show you that it does work in just a moment. Why does it work? What are we doing? How can we mimic that virtually, which is always a struggle, right? It's a completely different, philosophy of teaching. And so some of the things that we just put into place, we decided to keep some of the grading the same, grade based off of attendance and their Hawks assignments and the reviews assignments. So Hawks assignments and review assignments, not that big of a deal. Of course, they're doing those. We can track those. That doesn't change. Attendance is the biggest thing. And that was the biggest conversation we had with these online Corequisites. How do we keep that student engagement? Because you're sitting at 22 students, you're doing math with them. I mean, I tease that like halfway through the semester, you don't even have to put your name on the paper. I can just see your work and know who it is. And you guys that teach those smaller classes and work with those students day in and day out know that. How do you do that online? It's not the same. And so one of the things we decided to put into place was this for attendance, for students to contact weekly. And so that was how and I'm actually teaching an online quantitative reasoning right now. And so when I mark attendance, students are asked weekly to initiate it, not just me, because I send out lots of emails and reminders and stuff, but they need to contact me. And it's really kind of a line of communication. It can be a phone call, it can be a Zoom, it can be an email. Most of the time it's email. It can be face-to-face if we have students that are just take it online, but maybe they're close and they come up for a tutoring or something. But it's just a line of communication for us. And students, I mean, even if they're like, hey, everything's fine. Well, I'll pull up their Hawks assignments. I'll see, like, write a little report, love all those reports, and say, hey, I noticed that, you spent a lot of time on, intro to probability. Anything I can help you? Or sometimes I'll even send like a video, like some of the video tutorials, like I kind of know which questions you might have problems with. And so it really, that has been, although not perfect, has been a pretty good way. And then a lot of times students will respond back. And sometimes we end up even setting up like a Zoom or something. So that's been kind of the way we track attendance for the online Corequisites. I do have a Google form that I utilize for tutoring requests and something, let's see if that link is, yeah, it's going to work. Something really, really silly and simple, but I have found this really helpful because, again, the online Corequisite, those students, you have them in class. It's kind of this structured tutoring. And the very first semester, I kind of had some tutoring set up already and students weren't attending, or I would have I'd have one student attend all the time and not doing any independent work. And so I just kind of put this into place, and they just fill out this quick little Google form and send it to me. And I set up a Zoom time with them. I have some nighttime office hours and, some different times that we go. I see the time. Some different times that are structured that would work for them. But I do ask them to spend 30 minutes and learn and 30 minutes in practice. And that has really helped. I can run the report and I can see, and a lot of times then they don't need, see if I can get back to my PowerPoint now. There we go. A lot of times if they've actually spent the time, again, academic success skills, like teaching them to be independent. And so that's been kind of something helpful to utilize their resources, which with the learn and the practice, they have a lot. But sometimes I still need to step in. So I think I've talked a little bit about, removing this math hurdle, increasing retention and graduation. That's what we're all about. We're getting some really great qualitative data back, great student feedback back. And there's Isaac. I had Isaac. And these are, I'm going to read these out loud to you, but these are a couple of our students from various pathways, some that all of them needed a co-requisite, and they were able to get through their math in one semester. This chart just shows kind of I've had a couple of people in the past ask about our different pathways, like percentages of students. So you see that a lot of our students, we have a pretty robust health science program here with an MLT program and PTA, and then our nursing. So we have a lot of students going into statistics. But you can see that it really it helped us have that 8%, less than 10% of students going into the pre-calc for engineering, which those instructors love because they can really just focus in on what those students are going to need for calculus, and have been able to teach that class probably like it was originally meant to be taught. These are our success rates. Now these are overall, and I just pulled our transitional report this morning. I was really hoping we'd have last year's data up, but again, so sorry, we'll blame it on COVID. Everything gets blamed on COVID. But you can see that when we move to that, we're rocking along there at 52%. This is being able to complete it in 1 year, and not just one semester. That's what you saw earlier, but we give them 1 year to finish it out. So that way this encompasses those students needing basic algebra. They would take it in the fall and then take their pre-calc in the spring. Or it also encompasses our students that wait, that don't take it their first semester, because we've been working on that, like I stated. So we're ranging there. I mean, between 70–80% of our students are able to complete their college level math in 1 year. And like I said, the next step for our data is going to be taking, and this includes, I'm sorry, this would not include our online Cowrecks. Now, we did have some online math courses, but it would not have our online Cowreck students included. So our next step is to look at that and look at this student support. We pulled a couple of classes randomly and just ran completion rates, and they are very similar to that of our face-to-face classes, but nothing set in stone overall where I can share with you. So still collecting data. Hopefully, if you check in with me in a couple of months, I'll have a little bit more, but our assessment coordinator is pretty bogged right now. This is my contact info. This was kind of our group that started the math pathways, and this was actually us in Charleston a couple of years ago. But anyways, I would love to answer any questions, or if you have things that are working. I shared some of our concerns and our challenges. I would love to hear those as well. That's about it. Q&A.
Thank you so much. That was so informative, and we certainly appreciate you sharing your experience and also what you have planned for the future as well. Everybody, if you have any questions at this time, please feel free to enter those into the Q&A box at this time. we have one comment, not so much a question, but Susan Baker shared training for your instructors that will be teaching the study skills is very important. Dr. Paul Nolting came to our college several times and trained our instructors and tutors. It made a huge difference in how the instructors presented this material and in turn, how students responded to it.
Yes, thank you. And I believe he is presenting today at the end of the day, I believe. So thank you for reminding. I think I have one of his books. So that is a really, thank you, Susan. I need to pull that book out and take a look. And yes, if anyone is doing that well, I would love to hear how they're structuring that at their institution. I'm sure many of us would.
Absolutely. So if we have any other comments, it doesn't have to be a question. You can feel free to enter those into the Q&A box. The chat is disabled, so you can just share those comments in the Q&A. Have one question from Carolyn Bowie. Are adjunct instructors included in the Corequisite and course combo?
Yeah, yes, actually, and it works the same. So we have so right now, actually an adjunct instructor is teaching my Corecs that I don't get to teach this semester. But we have a couple of our pathways. I shared that the Cowreck, we required the Cowreck be taught by the same instructor for online classes, and a couple of those are adjuncts. And so to be honest, I use something really similar to what I had just have to kind of train the instructors, and we kind of go through as our adjuncts come in or our new instructors come in. We just hired a new full-time instructor. Like I kind of give them the whole spiel of like how we came about, our philosophy of the pathways and the Corecs, and really try to make sure that we're all on board. So I do that same for our adjuncts as well. We have some fantastic ones.
I just realized I was still on mute. That's great. Alan Phelps asks, what kind of special topics do you include in your math courses? In statistics, for example?
So the special topics is kind of the name of the class. So if you're actually asking what content we cover in special topics, I would say that other than a lot of the special topics time is spent working on the credit bearing course. And so we've tried to find a balance of not giving students that would maybe take more time anyways to finish assignments than to give them a whole bunch more assignments. So it's kind of that balance. So I would say a lot of what we do in special topics, statistics, for example, last week, I know, so we just hit probability. We've been working with fraction, decimal, percentage, conversion, prereq skill, need to have it. And so I know that that's what she taught last week. She used some of the integrated reviews to teach it. So it's kind of, and I'm not sure if you use Hawks or not, they actually spiral. Sometimes the first time you use it, you're like, this is really random. Why is this integrated review here? But it actually spirals to where the students are taught it's remediation just right in time. And so kind of to answer your question, a lot of the special topics are those prereq skills, but sometimes it is driven by also student questions. And so that's the great thing about 22 students is that it can really be what students need.
Thank you. We have another question from Carolyn Bowie. What are the credit hours for the corequisite course, college level math course?
It is a 3-hour course, and it is not considered, it's at 0 level. And so I believe they can still use their, as far as financial aid goes, I believe they can still use their Pell for that. I may be wrong on that. But it's a 3 credit hour. So they take 6 hours of math if they're taking their Coreq along with their pathway, their credit bearing that semester.
Great. I actually have a question myself. So you talked about in some of your future plans using some more of the academic success skills and kind of leaning on some of Hawk's resources for that as well. So I wondered, you mentioned kind of a 2-week seminar at the beginning of the semester. Are you planning to have it more of a group lecture / discussion style, or maybe have some quizzes involved for a small part of the grade?
Well, and we found, I kind of was digging around on the Hawks website and found some resources that are on there, kind of some like little lesson plans that go along. So I actually just printed those out. I was talking to one of our instructors about that actually yesterday, printed those out because we wanted it to be a little bit different. I mean, although the assignments are great, maybe it's something that we're doing together in class. It's a really great way for students to understand how Hawks works. So that's kind of what we've used it for in the past, is just like, this is the way the structure works. This is how we'll use it. This is learn, this is practice, but I think we will have some really try to have some good engagement and collaboration. Those first couple of weeks, we try to go on and establish those cohorts and get students talking and do some icebreakers, and they're, sometimes kind of grumpy about it. So this might be a pretty great way for engagement, and to use some of those activities, and then to come in with some activities. Maybe we were talking about like when we present students with open-ended questions and they want to know what the answer is, like, well, there isn't an answer, or there's many answers, and they look at you like you're crazy. And so we talked about like setting the stage kind of with some growth mindset types of activities that might go along with those academic success skills.
That's awesome. I also had another question. So regarding the problem-based learning, that was something you said you want to dive in a little bit more in the future. As far as what you've been doing so far, have students come up to you or maybe emailed you saying, hey, like, this is really helping me make connections? Like, have they shared how that's helped them personally?
They have. So interestingly enough, I just did a project today in quantitative reasoning, and it's looking at percent change, and it's looking at tuition and room and board percent change. Anyways, it's one of the Hawks for viewing like mathematically activities. And so we were having this whole conversation, and one of the students, they're always a little grumpy about the projects at the beginning because they're higher level on Bloom's taxonomy. Like, it's, a lot of times creating or distinguishing and those types of things, and they don't want to do it. And so usually after about the first one or two, then they kind of finally get on board. I'm pretty friendly with the grading as well, purposely, because I want them just to have a lot of freedom and not be so worried about, whether I need them to be accurate, but like have those conversations, let's change answers, And but today, actually, one of the students said, they're like, hey, I was actually thinking about transferring in the fall. And so I pulled up the percent increases for the different, and I ran all this, and she was like showing me this chart where she had made like, use like the percents to determine how much it was going to cost here if this was this. Anyways, I was like, well, that's pretty amazing. So yeah, I have found a lot of, and it's at any level, the projects they can be a headache because they're sometimes difficult to get everybody on board and engaged, and they take time. And but yeah, I've overwhelmingly rewarding if you also persevere, if you have academic success skills and allot the time in your classroom to do it.
That's great. That's really impressive. The student had that experience, was able to go ahead and start really putting those skills into practice. That's awesome in real life. Well, it looks like we are right at time, and definitely want everyone to be able to have a small break before our keynote coming up. So thank you so much for your informative session and for sharing your expertise with us. And thank you to all of our attendees who came today, and I hope you all are enjoying the conference so far. I did want to let you know that our next session is our lunch keynote speaker with Arjun Buxi, and you can view the chat. I'm about to place the chat resources here for session meeting room links, or access the conference website for a complete list of all of our sessions and their descriptions today. And while you're at the conference website, don't forget to swing by the exhibit hall to say hello to our Hawks team. If you view a quick 5-minute demonstration, you'll be entered to win one of our hourly giveaways, and we have lots of wonderful prizes that we are giving away. Just if you are a $100 Amazon gift card, 1-year subscription to Disney Plus, or a 6-month subscription to Audible. We will see you at the next session, and I'll go ahead and paste those links in the chat now. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.